Hey there, Mr. Withrow here. All right, this one we're going to solve quadratics using square roots. All right, and this one is identifiable because you're missing the x term. All right, so there's only going to be two terms. There's going to be an x squared term. You're going to have an x squared term and a constant term. All right, and then an equal sign and either a number or another constant or whatever. And sometimes these are already separated, however we want to do it, right? But you're going to have an x squared term and a number, adding and subtracting. And sometimes there's going to be a number that's attached to the x squared term, but we'll get into that in a minute. All right, so what the whole thing is square roots, we have to remember a couple things with the square roots. So square root, right, you're used to seeing 4 being 2 times 2, right? And you're used to seeing 9 being 3 times 3. And we can go all the way through here. 16, 4 times 4. These are called perfect squares, right? 25, and so on and so forth. These are numbers that you're going to have to remember. We did this a while ago. Remember that when we did the factoring and we did perfect squares, we had this listing here, right? If you see these numbers, then you're going to think these numbers. Well, we're going to sort of kind of have this same thought process here, all right? So remember with square roots, the square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. That's what we're looking for. The square root of 81 is 9. These are the things that you're going to have to sort of kind of get used to and for solving quadratics by square roots, because the square root, right? The square root undoes, however you want to say that. The square root negates, cancels out the square, okay? So the square and the square root cancel each other out, right? So if we had the square root of 3 squared, right? Then you basically would take your pencil and you would cross out both of these things because they're going to cancel each other out, and you're left with 3. Well, because what is 3 squared? 3 squared is 9. All right? Now, I'm telling you this because you're going to have x squared. So to get just x by itself, you're going to have to take the square root of it. And notice what I did there. I do it this way. I make that square root and I cancel through that square because these two things cancel each other out, and this falls down to x. All right? So keep those in mind. Keep that stuff in mind, and then we're going to do a couple of examples here. All right? So we can do a plain Jane one, right? We can say x squared minus 64 is equal to 0, right? The key thing here is you're going to get the x squared by itself, all right? So that's the key. You have to get the x squared by itself before you can do the square root. Before square root. All right, what's that mean? So I'm adding 64 here, right? So I'm going to get x squared is equal to 64. So for me to find out what x is, then I have to take the square root, and I take the square root of 64. The x falls down. The square root of 64 is 8. That's what we're looking for. Now, the actual answer is plus or minus, because remember, if I put negative 8 here, negative 8 squared is positive 64. 64 minus 64 is 0. So we have to do plus or minus 8. All right, so these are plain Jane ones. X squared minus 64, you kick the 64 over, and you're ready to go. All right, sometimes they're going to make you work a little bit. So sometimes they're going to have 5x squared minus 20 is equal to 0. So now you have a number attached to the x squared. So basically you're going to think to yourself, okay, I've got to solve for x squared, right? So solve for x squared. Or what I said earlier, you have to get the x squared by itself. So here I'm going to add 20. I'm going to get 5x squared is equal to 20. Then I'm going to divide by 5. I'm going to get x squared is equal to 4. So now I have that x squared by itself, which is what I want. So then I take the square root of both sides, And now the x falls down, and I get plus or minus 2, because that's what I need. So if I put negative 2 in here, negative 2 squared is a positive 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. That's what I want. All right, so solving by square roots is that your key is to get the x squared term by itself and then go from there. Now, believe it or not, right, sometimes you actually are going to have a fraction. So don't get too nervous about that. So let's look at this. So 4x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. All right, so the first thing is that we got to try to solve for x squared. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. I'm going to get 4x squared is equal to 25. I'm going to divide by 4. So I'm going to get x squared is equal to 25 fourths. Please do not change to a decimal. No decimals. No decimals. All right, so what's going to happen here is you're going to take the square root. Well, when I take a square root of a fraction, I'm really having two fractions, or two square roots. The square root of 25 and the square root of 4. That's what it means. Well, what is the square root of 25? Well, that's 5, and the square root of 4 is 2. So remember that we want both plus or minus, and so we're done. All right, so sometimes you're going to have these perfect squares, 25 and 4, 49 and 9, and then you're just going to have a fraction, 5 halves. Okay, so nothing too crazy here, so don't get too nervous if you see a fraction here, because more times than not, it's going to be working itself out. Now, sometimes, right, sometimes they're going to give us some that maybe aren't so pretty, right? And what I mean by that is something like this. So x squared minus 6 equals 0. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Well, x squared is equal to 6. Well, last time I checked, I don't have an x squared. So if I looked back on my numbers here, I don't see 6 here in this columns, right? So this isn't a perfect square. So since it's not a perfect square, my answer is just going to be the square root of 6. Really, it's plus or minus the square root of 6, but that's okay. So this would be my answer. Sometimes your answer looks like this. Sometimes your answer may look like this. So if I have 2x squared minus 9, remember our goal is to get the x squared by itself. So I add 90 to both sides. I get 2x squared is equal to 90. I divide by 2. I get x squared is equal to 45. And then I'm going to take the x squared, or the square root of both, and I'm going to get x as the square root of 45. But I've got to stop for a second, because either I'm going to have a really good memory and really know how to work this, or I need to have a calculator that does this for me. And my suggestion to you is to get a calculator, right? So what happens here when I have my calculator, I hit my second function here and it gives me a square root sign. So now I put 45 in, and then I hit enter and it tells me 3 square roots of 5. This is really my answer. This is the simplification of, or simplifying the square root of 45. That's what the answer needs to be, not this, this. So really my answer is x is equal to 3 square roots of 5. Where did I get that? Remember that you have to break down 45 and you got to see if one of these numbers work out for you. And 45 is 9, right? Because this is 9 and 5, and this is 3 and 3. Well, since I get to pair up, I take a pair out, so that pair goes over here, and this stays on the inside, right? So since it's not a pair, it stays on the inside. This is a whole other lesson. Just go with me here for right now, all right? So this is solving by square roots. So biggest thing is to make sure that you get the x squared term by itself. That's what you want to do before you take the square root. All right? Keep having fun.